with everything that's been happening over the last few days, thanks to the hard left Marxists running around the streets in the UK and in the US, promoting their identity politics and collectivism, things are getting slightly out of hand. It's actually reaching the mainstream media, academia, and now politics. We have Keir Starmer, the leader of the Labour Party, kneeling. This is yesterday at 11 a.m. in his office. It's a massive office, by the way. So he's kneeling with our second favourite crazy Labour MP, Angela Rayner, who's blocked me on Twitter. So basically, this is their way of showing solidarity, that we care. We white people care about oppression. Where is the oppression, guys? So we are here with our new contributor. We're going to have a joint show with Katie every Wednesday. Katie, welcome to the show.
Hi, nice to be with you.
So what do you think is happening with Keir Starmer? Is he losing his mind?
I mean, I always have to consider that I am a little bit biased against the Labour Party. However, I think that it is, just virtue signalling, classic things we have seen from the left, rather than any policy implementations or any sort of actual action as well. You saw this raised by Priti Patel yesterday, obviously in the House of Commons, when she said, will honourable friends from the Labour benches help her in lobbying Labour councils to, act on their newfound anti-racism. I also find it perplexing somewhat, the history of the trade unions with Labour in terms of when the trade unions were the first anti-immigrant movements and things like that. Nobody's brought up those sorts of points either. So I find it, virtue signalling action, not addressing any issues in terms of poverty or crime or anything like that.
I mean, firstly, you're right, because it wasn't just the traditional trade unionists. Even until recently, you had Gordon Brown running a campaign in 2010, British jobs for British workers and all that stuff, which is, people think is always kind of more of a right-wing nationalist thing. But actually, historically, the traditional left-wingers, Labour Party, were in favour of, nationalism in terms of at least jobs. But the problem I have with Keir Starmer is that what he's doing is, essentially surrendering to identity politics, and this is against British values, the British values of self-determination, individualism, respect, everybody, and treating everybody equally, and tolerance and everything. And why is this happening? Because it's not just, by the way, British values. It's also Judeo-Christian values that he's going against. His party is supposed to be, the opposition party, and this is a Christian country, whether you like it or not. So, what do you think?
Well, I think it comes from various different issues to do with the Labour Party and the left. They also like the very stereotypical narrative of the oppressor and the oppressed, and they never want to go too much more into complex detail, whereas history is incredibly varied. People have their good points, people have their bad points. Sometimes I want to smack people around the head with a history book, because people aren't perfect. They are fallible. And I think that the left forgets this in terms of the people they idolise, especially in what they've done with Black Lives Matter. But this comes from a classic socialist mindset of grouping people into categories. Now, on the right, although you see traditional conservatives do this more, however, in terms of libertarians, we're more about individualism. Same with classical liberalism as well. And that has been done away with. Individual responsibility has been done away with. It's easy to group people into one category, to paint them as good versus bad. And that's the classic way identity politics work. We've seen this with feminism and masculinity and the so-called patriarchy and things like that. But we have also now seen this in terms of race, in terms of when people say, dead white men, as if, being white is inherently in and of itself bad. And that's just not true. People there are different hierarchies in society which cut across many different aspects of life, and there are many people who are white who've had extremely difficult circumstances, and those aren't being acknowledged by the Black Lives Matter movement at all. Which is why we're seeing lots of uprisings in the north of England to do with the far right, because they just play off of this. When you're kowtowing to identity politics and vandalising, war memorials and things like that, that doesn't help your narrative. You need to listen and work together with people
Yeah.
rather than essentially trying to irritate them.
Firstly, you mentioned feminism. For those who don't know, Katie is not the biggest fan of feminism. Secondly, we have the all this identity politics stuff is actually spreading everywhere like a virus. It's also reached Sky News and Adam Bolton. Adam Bolton was talking about Charles Dickens. You know, he's done a lot of work and he's dead. And this is exactly. Let's watch this clip because he introduced Charles Dickens as a dead white man.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Mr. Morpurgo. There are those who would say that Charles Dickens is a dead white man. So what do we celebrate when we remember him today?
Well, certainly not that he's a dead white man, and it's just not good to bring colour into this thing at all. He was a remarkable man.
Yeah, why would you bring skin color into this debate? I don't get it. Why are they doing this?
So it is this stereotypical intersectional point of view, which stems from I don't want to say Marxist ideology because socialism and the left are far more complicated than that. Mm-hmm. But it's this idea again of grouping people into categories and that good versus bad. This good versus bad you also see in terms of populism. Populism, people like to think populism is classically of the right, but it's not. We've got populists on the left as well, and that is in the idea of the good people, the pure people, and the corrupt elite, so to speak. And the white people are now being seen as that corrupt elite. And all white people are being, given this, broad brush approach when it doesn't account for anything in terms of nationality, background, class, oppression and difficulties they've felt in life for various different reasons. There are many different white people, there are many different black people, there are many different Asian people. You've got the different nationalities, ethnicities, races, cultures, and more than that, the most diverse population is the individual.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, you're right, because when people say, for example, in Parliament, you need to have a percentage of black people, brown people, women, and all that. They assume that what they're basically implying is if you have 10 new black MPs, then that will represent what black people think. Well, just because the skin color is the same, that means they think the same. That's absolutely idiotic. And what they did in Oxford yesterday, there was a protest for, again, one of the statues. Everybody kneeled. There was one person who didn't kneel. Not all heroes wear capes. Peter Hitchens doesn't wear a cape. It was absolutely brilliant. He was just standing there in the crowd. And I don't know if he got booed or not, because I haven't seen a video of this. But this is just standing there. He doesn't care. So I found this on Twitter. What do you think of Peter Hitchens not kneeling?
That is precisely the behaviour I would expect from Peter Hitchens. It doesn't surprise me whatsoever. I was quite pleased to see that. And also coming back to the tokenistic attitude of having people in Parliament of a certain race or gender or sexuality. I've always used the example of, as a woman, I am not represented by Yvette Cooper or Diane Abbott. I am actually better represented by somebody who is more closely aligned to my ideological beliefs. Although he's not British and although he's not, an elected politician.
Or a woman.
Thomas Sowell is probably the closest I am ideologically. And that's not to say I agree with him on everything. But the fact that he is a Black American man and he came from a completely different socioeconomic background to myself, yet we agree on the same principles.
It's a weird situation. You mentioned Thomas Sowell. If you don't know who he is, make sure to Google him, and you learn a lot. But these idiots started to go after statues, then street names. Then I'm guessing next is history books. This is exactly what they did in Iran after the revolution. The Islamic Republic started to change the basically history books. Instead of they removed all references to the monarchy and the kings and everything that they had. That's what they do. But now they're coming after comedy. So Little Britain has now been pulled from iPlayer and Netflix because times have changed. Comedy doesn't change in that sense. So it's supposed to be offensive. Comedy is supposed to be, otherwise it's not funny. Especially British comedy's sense of humor, with sarcasm and dry sense of humor. Do you think comedy is in danger?
I've always thought comedy's in danger. Comedy and comedians have always been targets when free speech starts to get rolled back. They're the first to be targeted because they're the people who will go where others won't. They will go where journalists dare not tread. I mean, there are certainly many comedians I disagree with, and I think they are absolutely distasteful. For instance, Frankie Boyle. I'm not a huge fan of Frankie Boyle. I think that the way he's targeted some people, especially, for instance, Katie Price's son, is distasteful. However, I would never seek to get him banned or say he couldn't do that, because unless somebody is inciting violence, then you need to have even if it's comedy, you need to have those views open in the air.
And also, it's free market with comedy because it's a business. So if you don't like Frankie Boyle, then don't go and don't see his shows or whatever. And and if enough people don't like him, he will realize and his business will go down. It's just simple logic.
Exactly. I mean, if it was in terms of the BBC, it's not necessarily a private company, but we're talking about Netflix. For instance, Netflix removed Little Britain, and there needs to be questions. Obviously, Netflix is a company; they are free to do as what they please. However, I think that we've seen with a lot of companies that they have bowed down to the very vocal people on Twitter and social media, unless they get, because they're scared of being attacked. And many companies who haven't spoken out have been attacked. And what people fail to realise, and we saw this with the Brexit referendum, we saw this with the Scottish independence referendum, we've seen this with general election after general election and the election in the United States, that social media does not determine what the general public think. The vast majority of the general public are not out there spouting their views on Twitter and on Facebook. The vast majority of the general public are silent. And that is often where you find your silent conservatives or the people who are anti-EU.
You're right. There's a difference. You got one on the one side, the silent majority and ordinary people, and on the other side, the loud side, who control the narrative in the media and academia. Ironically, they're not necessarily, as they say themselves, educated or informed. So some people said in the past, some of the most stupid people are the educated ones, because yesterday they started this campaign against Sir Robert Peel, one of the best prime ministers we've had. He was a classical liberal Tory prime minister. He also basically changed the name of the party, started the Modern Conservative Party, and also the Met Police. His dad, when Robert Peel was a child, his dad he signed a petition against ending slavery and all that. These idiots got the wrong Peel, and they've decided to bring down the Robert Peel statue, even though he was a child. I think he was 17 or 18 at the time when this happened with his dad. What's that got to do with him? Read your history, guys. Read your history.
I think that, as you said, people should know more about history. People are saying, and this has been my main irritation, is people have been telling me and you and other people to educate themselves. Now, if we're going to educate ourselves, that doesn't mean that you stick to extremely biased representations of history. And yes, that does swing both ways. I'm not saying that everybody we have statues of is a brilliant person. However, if we're going to apply that same criticism, we also need to be critical of all of this literature that is being forced down people's necks, which is incredibly left-wing and incredibly radical. This is stuff that even my former left-wing lecturers are coming out against. I actually went to the University of Liverpool, and they've just announced that they're renaming one of their halls of residence Gladstone Halls. And that is because his father was a slave owner.
What's that got to do with William Gladstone? I don't get it.
Yeah, Liverpool was built off the back of slavery, so Well,
So why can't we just shut down Liverpool if the whole city was was built on it? Just like close down the whole city, right? Remove the city.
history is not, pardon the pun, black and white. It is in fact shades of complete grey. Things aren't, very clear in some circumstances, and people aren't 100% good and they're not 100% bad. And I don't think people have quite grasped nuance or complexities that history needs. Hence why they end up attacking the wrong statue.
No, it's idiocy. This is going to be an ongoing issue, at least for the next few days or weeks. You never know. It might actually start. This might be the beginning of something worse that could go for like years, slowly. But hopefully we're going to have you on the show more regularly now, Katie. So if you guys enjoyed this discussion and Katie as a contributor, then leave a comment. Let us know. Give us a feedback. Say good things. And if you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click on the bell next to it. And we're going to start our members-only exclusive content and the video calls that we're going to be doing on Zoom. So make sure to check out this link. Where's the link? That one. It's in the description as well. youtube.com/MyTZ/join. Become a member, support the channel, and get some perks in return. Thank you, Katie. Any last few words?
Thank you, Maya. And all I will say is let's fight identity politics, whether it's from the right or the left, because we're all individuals.
Perfect. Thank you very much.